In the heart of the city's glittering skyline, Alexander Kane stood tall as the undisputed king of the corporate world. As CEO of Kane Enterprises, his name was synonymous with power, ambition, and relentless success. Tailored suits clung to his broad shoulders, his sharp gaze commanding every room he entered. Confidence was his armor, a carefully crafted shield against the world's chaos. But there was one detail that intrigued those who noticed: a small antique pendant that hung from a silver chain beneath his crisp white shirt. It was old, worn, and oddly out of place amid his sleek modern style. No one knew where it came from or why he never removed it, not even for the most formal events. Some whispered it was a family heirloom. Others thought it a token of some forgotten love. Alexander never spoke of it. Behind his steady, unshakable exterior, there was a loneliness that no amount of boardroom victories could erase. Late at night, in the quiet solitude of his penthouse, the world's applause faded into silence. It was then that the weight of the pendant seemed heavier, an invisible tether pulling him back to a time he refused to share. Pendant was more than just an accessory. It was a key to a past buried deep beneath the surface of his polished success. A past filled with shadows and secrets, waiting patiently for the right moment to resurface. Alexander Kane walked through the glass doors of the city's grandest hotel, his steps steady and sure. Polished marble floor reflected his sharp shoes as he moved with the confidence of a man used to control. The busy lobby was filled with people rushing to meetings or catching flights, but Alexander seemed to exist in a world apart. His dark eyes scanned the room, always alert, always in command. Yet, beneath the surface, a quiet emptiness lingered. He was here for a business dinner, but his mind was elsewhere. The weight of the antique pendant resting against his chest felt heavier tonight. No one had ever asked about it, and he liked it that way. It was a piece of his past he kept locked away, far from prying eyes. As he reached the elevators, his gaze caught a woman sitting alone near the large windows. She wore a simple dress, soft and flowing, the kind that seemed to whisper of gentle mornings and quiet evenings. Her hair was loosely tied back, a few strands falling softly around her face. There was a sadness in her eyes that made her look fragile, but also strong in a quiet way. She was not like the usual guests here. She seemed to carry a story. Alexander hesitated, then moved closer, the subtle scent of her perfume filling the air between them. He almost didn't notice the pendant when he glanced down, but she did. Her eyes flickered to the small silver chain that peeked from beneath his shirt collar. For a moment, something strange passed over her face, a look he could not understand. It was not surprise, nor was it fear. It was something deeper, something almost like recognition. She quickly looked away, as if afraid she had seen too much. Alexander's curiosity sparked. Who was she, and why did his pendant affect her so? "Excuse me," he said, his voice calm but edged with interest. "Are you all right?" She looked up, startled by the sudden attention. Her eyes met his, and for a moment the world seemed to pause. Then she smiled gently, a small, sad smile. "Yes, thank you. Just waiting for someone." Alexander nodded, stepping back slightly. He wasn't a man to push when faced with mystery. But something about her lingered in his mind long after he moved away. As the elevator doors closed, his thoughts returned to the pendant. He had worn it for years without question. Now, he wondered if it was more than a simple keepsake. Was it a link to the past that still had power? And who was this woman who saw what no one else did? That night, as Alexander sat alone in his penthouse, the city lights flickering below, the pendant rested heavily on his chest. He turned it slowly in his fingers, the cold metal cool against his skin. The woman's face floated in his mind, kind, gentle, yet marked by a sadness he could not forget. He did not know it then, but this brief encounter would change everything. Pendant was a secret waiting to be uncovered, and the woman was a key he could not ignore. In the quiet darkness, Alexander Kane was no longer just a powerful CEO. He was a man standing on the edge of a mystery, one that would bring his carefully guarded past rushing back to life. The next morning, the city was bathed in a soft golden light as the sun rose over towering buildings and busy streets. Inside a quiet cafe not far from Alexander Kane's office, the woman from the hotel sat with a small child by her side. The woman's name was Clara, and her daughter Lily was just 6 years old. Clara's eyes, still holding that gentle sadness, watched Lily carefully as the girl sipped her hot chocolate and played with a small toy. Clara had lived a quiet life for years, careful to keep her past hidden, especially from Lily. But fate had a way of bringing things back when least expected. Today, fate was about to knock loudly on Alexander Kane's carefully controlled world. Alexander was in the cafe too, meeting with a client over coffee. The business talk was important, but his mind was distracted. He kept thinking about Clara and that strange moment when she had looked at his pendant with an expression he couldn't understand. He wished he could ask her about it, but something inside him told him to wait, to let things happen naturally. As the meeting ended, Alexander prepared to leave. He glanced toward the corner of the cafe where Clara was gathering her things. Lily, who had been quietly observing the tall man with the pendant, suddenly stood up and walked toward him without hesitation. Her small fingers pointed straight at the pendant hanging from his neck. In a clear, unexpected voice she said, "Mom, that's yours." Cafe fell silent. The words hung in the air like a sudden storm. People stopped what they were doing and stared at the little girl, then at Alexander, then at Clara. Clara's hand froze midair, her eyes wide with shock. Alexander's confident posture stiffened as the pendant caught the light, shimmering between them. For a moment, no one moved. The world seemed to slow down, the sounds of the city fading into the background. Clara and Alexander both stared at the pendant and then at each other. Calm control they usually held broke for just a second, revealing something deeper beneath the surface. Clara's mind raced. How could Lily say that? Pendant had been lost to her for so many years, a symbol from a time she wanted to forget. Seeing it again in the hands of a man she barely knew was like opening a door she thought was closed forever. Alexander's heart pounded. Pendant had been a mystery to everyone else, but now this child knew something he did not. The memories he tried to keep buried began to stir, flooding back with surprising clarity. He remembered a woman who had once worn a similar pendant, a woman whose face was now clearer in his mind. "Where did you see this pendant before, Lily?" Clara asked softly, trying to keep her voice steady, but inside she was trembling. Lily looked up at her mother with innocent eyes and said, "It was in the box with my old things. You told me a story once, but I forgot." Alexander took a step closer, his voice calm but serious. "You said it's yours?" His gaze searched Clara's face for answers. Clara looked down, biting her lip. She had no choice now but to face the past she tried to hide. "I don't know what this means yet," she said quietly, "but it's time we talked." People around them slowly returned to their own lives, but for Alexander and Clara, everything had changed. The quiet distance between them shattered by a child's innocent words, bringing a past filled with mystery and pain rushing back into the present. Alexander touched the pendant lightly, feeling its cold weight and the pull it had on both their lives. He looked at Clara and saw the flicker of something he had never noticed before, a hope, maybe, or a fear. Pendant was no longer just a piece of metal. It was a key, unlocking memories that would not stay hidden any longer. As Clara gathered Lily's hand and rose to leave, Alexander knew this was only the beginning. Their worlds had collided in a way neither expected, and the journey ahead was full of questions without answers. Past was no longer behind them, it was here, alive and waiting. And somewhere deep inside, Alexander felt the old loneliness shift, replaced by a strange new feeling. It was fear, yes, but also something like hope. For the first time in a long time, he was no longer alone. Quiet room was filled with tension as Alexander Kane and Clara sat across from each other. The soft light from the window fell gently on their faces, revealing the unspoken weight between them. Pendant rested on the table, its silver surface catching the sunlight like a small beacon. It was more than just metal now, It was a doorway to the past, a past that Clara was finally ready to share. Clara took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly. For years, she had kept this story locked inside, hiding the truth even from herself. But now, looking at Alexander, she knew it was time. The memories, the pain, the love, they all demanded to be spoken aloud. "I never wanted you to find out like this," she began softly, her voice breaking the silence. "That pendant, it belonged to me once. It was a promise between me and someone I loved very much." Alexander's eyes searched hers, a mixture of surprise and something deeper, a flicker of hope. "You and I," he said quietly, "we shared a past. But I didn't know." Clara nodded, her gaze dropping to the pendant. "Years ago, before everything changed, we were different people. I was full of dreams, and you were full of ambition. We believed in a future together. That pendant was a symbol, a reminder of the promise we made to never forget each other, no matter what happened." She paused, swallowing hard as the memories came rushing back. But life had other plans. Circumstances tore us apart, and we lost each other. I thought the pendant was gone forever, just like the hope I had. Alexander's fingers brushed the pendant, feeling its cold weight. The emotions inside him were raw and confusing. He had built walls around his heart to protect himself, but now those walls were trembling. The past he had tried to forget was no longer distant. It was here, alive and powerful. "I remember those days," he said, his voice low. "The dreams, the promises. I never stopped thinking about you, Clara. But the world pulled us in different directions, and I couldn't find a way back." Clara looked up, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I thought I was alone. I raised Lily by myself, hiding from the memories, trying to build a new life. But the pendant always reminded me of what we lost. And now, seeing it again, here with you, it's like fate is giving us a second chance." Alexander reached across the table, his hand covering hers. The warmth of his touch sent a spark through her, a mix of comfort and pain. "We both have scars," he said gently. "But maybe it's time to stop running from the past. Maybe it's time to face it together." Clara nodded slowly, feeling a strange mix of fear and hope. The love story they once shared was fragile, but it was not broken. Pendant, once a silent symbol, was now a bridge between two hearts that still beat for each other. Outside the window, the city buzzed with life, unaware of the quiet reunion happening in this small room. Alexander and Clara sat side by side, their pasts unveiled and their futures uncertain. The road ahead was full of challenges, but for the first time in years, they were ready to walk it together. The pendant lay between them, a small silver promise shining brightly, a promise that some loves, no matter how deeply hidden, never truly fade away. The morning sun poured gently through the tall windows of Alexander Kane's penthouse, casting long shadows across the polished floor. The city below was waking up, full of noise and movement, but inside there was a quiet calm. For the first time in a long while, Alexander did not sit alone in his grand living room. Sitting on the plush sofa beside him was Clara, and curled up next to her was Lily, her small hand resting lightly on her mother's knee. Lily looked around the elegant room with wide, curious eyes. The place was so different from her cozy little home, full of warmth and laughter. Here, everything was sharp and shiny, the kind of place where people spoke in hushed voices and moved with careful steps. Yet somehow Lily felt safe. Maybe it was because her mother was here. Or maybe it was because Alexander's presence, though unfamiliar, did not feel cold. First, Alexander had been unsure about letting them into his world. His life was built on control and order, and suddenly there were two people who brought unpredictability and warmth. Lily, with her bright smiles and endless questions, was like a small whirlwind. She asked about everything, the lights, the paintings, the books. Her innocence softened the edges of Alexander's guarded heart. One afternoon, as Clara prepared tea in the kitchen, Alexander found himself watching Lily closely. The little girl was sitting on the floor, playing with a simple wooden puzzle. She looked up at him and smiled shyly, holding up a piece and asking, "Can you help me?" Alexander nodded, moving closer and kneeling beside her. For a moment, the powerful CEO was just a man helping a child with a puzzle. Lily's eyes sparkled with delight as he carefully fit the pieces together, her small hands steady but eager. The awkwardness of their first meeting was fading, replaced by a gentle connection. Clara watched them from the kitchen doorway, a soft smile on her lips. She saw something new in Alexander, something she had not seen before. The walls around his heart were slowly crumbling, and Lily's presence was the key. The child's laughter filled the space, weaving warmth into a room that had once felt cold and distant. As days passed, the three of them found a rhythm. There were moments of quiet understanding and moments of gentle challenge. Lily asked questions that made Alexander think, questions about family, about love, about why people sometimes hurt each other. Clara sometimes caught him staring at the pendant, lost in thought, but when she met his gaze, he would smile, a real smile that reached his eyes. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with shades of pink and orange, Clara and Alexander sat together while Lily played nearby. The child had fallen asleep on the sofa, her breathing soft and steady. Alexander reached out and gently tucked a stray curl behind Clara's ear, a touch filled with unspoken feelings. "We are building something new," he said quietly, his voice low but certain. "Not just for me, but for all of us." Clara nodded, her heart full. She had hoped for a chance like this, a chance to heal, to love again. Past was still there, but it no longer controlled her. With Alexander and Lily beside her, the future felt possible. There were awkward moments too. Times when Alexander's old habits surfaced. His silence, his need for control. Clara understood this and gave him space, knowing trust took time. Lily, with her innocent wisdom, seemed to sense when to draw close and when to step back, her small presence a steady light. One afternoon, Lily tugged at Alexander's sleeve. "Daddy, can we go to the park?" she asked, her eyes shining with hope. Alexander hesitated, the thought of stepping away from work and routine uneasy. But then he looked at Clara, who smiled encouragingly, and at Lily, whose excitement was contagious. "Okay," he said, a rare softness in his voice. "Let's go." That day, as they walked hand in hand through the green park filled with blooming flowers and chirping birds, Alexander felt something he had not in years, pure, simple joy. Lily's laughter echoed around them, a sound that chased away old shadows. Clara walked beside them, her heart light. She saw the man she once loved opening up slowly, letting them into his world. The daughter, with her bright spirit and endless questions, was the bridge connecting past and present, fear and hope. Back at the penthouse, Alexander found himself looking at the pendant differently now. It was no longer just a symbol of a promise lost. It was a symbol of new beginnings, a promise they could make again, this time together. As the days turned into weeks, the three of them grew closer. The warmth in the penthouse grew too, filling spaces that had once been cold and empty. There were still challenges ahead, secrets to uncover and wounds to heal. But now Alexander Kane was not alone. He had Clara and Lily by his side, and together they were ready to face whatever the future held. In the quiet moments, when the city lights flickered outside the window and the world seemed still, Alexander allowed himself to hope. Hope for love, for family, for a life where the past no longer ruled but gently guided them forward. And with that hope came strength. The strength to open his heart, to let go of old fears, and to embrace the unexpected joy that Lily's arrival had brought into their lives. The bright days they had shared seemed to flicker like a fragile flame, threatened by the wind of old fears and new challenges. Alexander Kane's world was one of power and public attention, where every move was watched, every word measured. Clara's life had been quiet and small, shaped by simpler joys and careful protection from pain. Bringing these two worlds together was never going to be easy. After weeks of warmth and tentative happiness, the cracks began to show. At a charity gala held in one of the city's grand ballrooms, Alexander stood tall in his tailored tuxedo, the weight of the pendant resting against his chest. Clara was by his side, her presence calm and graceful, but the bright lights and cameras were overwhelming. The noise, the questions from strangers, and the endless scrutiny made her shrink inside. She felt out of place among the glittering crowd, and Alexander noticed. Later that night, in the quiet of his penthouse, Clara voiced the fear she had been holding back. "I'm not sure I belong in your world, Alexander," she said softly. "It's so different from what I know. I don't want to lose myself trying to fit in." Alexander looked at her, the man who ruled the business world, feeling suddenly unsure. "I want you here, Clara. All of you. But I also know it's hard. My life is complicated." Her eyes filled with tears. "I'm afraid the more we try, the more we'll lose what we have." The distance that had once seemed bridged by hope began to widen. Both of them wrestled with doubts and old wounds. Alexander's past, filled with ambition and sacrifice, clashed with Clara's desire for a peaceful life. Their fears whispered warnings in the dark, reminding them of all they had lost before. At the same time, outside forces stirred. Rumors began to spread about Alexander's sudden connection with Clara and her daughter. Gossip columns questioned her motives, casting shadows over her honesty. Business rivals saw an opportunity to weaken Alexander's image by attacking his private life. Pressure grew heavier with each passing day. One evening, after a tense meeting at his office, Alexander sat alone in the silence, the pendant cold against his skin. Memories of past betrayals and broken promises filled his mind. Could he trust again? Could he risk losing everything for love? Clara faced her own battles. The quiet life she had built was threatened by the spotlight. Friends who once supported her now questioned her choices. She felt torn between protecting Lily and stepping into a world that scared her. Their conversations grew shorter, filled with misunderstandings. Small arguments sparked from worries and insecurities. The warmth they had found began to fade, replaced by cold silence. One rainy night, after a particularly difficult day, Clara stood by the window, watching the city lights blur through the drops of rain. Alexander approached quietly, his voice gentle but heavy. "We can run from this, Clara. Or we can face it." She turned to him, eyes filled with tears and uncertainty. "What if facing it means losing each other again?" He took her hands in his, steadying her. "Then we fight. For us. For Lily. For the future we promised ourselves when we found each other again." In that moment, the choice was clear. They could let fear and doubt tear them apart, or they could embrace the uncertainty and build something stronger. The path ahead was not easy. There would be obstacles, pain, and hard decisions. But the bond they shared was worth fighting for. Pendant, once a silent symbol of a lost promise, now carried new meaning. It was a reminder that love was not just about joy, but also about courage, the courage to face the past and choose the future together. As the rain fell softly outside, Alexander and Clara stood side by side, ready to take the first step toward healing. Their journey was far from over, but for the first time in a long time, hope shone brighter than doubt. And in the quiet strength of that moment, they found the power to believe that love could conquer even the deepest fears. The evening air was cool and calm, carrying a quiet promise of change. Inside Alexander Kane's penthouse, the city lights twinkled like distant stars, reflecting the hope that was slowly growing in his heart. Past had been heavy, filled with pain and lost chances. But now, after everything they had faced, Alexander, Clara, and Lily were ready to begin something new together. Clara sat beside Alexander, her hand resting gently on his. The years of silence and secrets had finally broken down into honest words and shared truths. The pendant, which had once been a silent witness to their broken promises, now lay between them like a small treasure, shining softly in the warm light. "I never thought we could get here," Clara said quietly. "After all the hurt, the distance, I wasn't sure if forgiveness was possible." Alexander nodded, his eyes filled with a mixture of regret and hope. "I was afraid too. But love has a way of healing even the deepest wounds. And Lily's love has shown me how to open my heart again." Lily, who had been quietly playing nearby, looked up with her bright, innocent eyes. She smiled and crawled into Alexander's lap, wrapping her small arms around him. Her laughter was pure and unguarded, a sound that chased away the shadows of the past. The little girl's innocent love was like a bridge, connecting two adults who had once been lost in pain. She had unknowingly brought them back to a place where trust could grow, where forgiveness was possible. Alexander lifted Lily gently, holding her close as he spoke. "We have a choice now. To hold on to the past and its pain, or to build a future full of hope and love." Clara smiled, feeling a warmth she hadn't known in years. "I want that future. For us, for Lily, for the family we can be." Pendant, once a symbol of lost love and broken promises, now carried a new meaning. It was a symbol of hope, reunion, and the courage to forgive. As the night grew deeper, Alexander and Clara made a silent promise to each other, a promise to face whatever came next with open hearts and united strength. The city outside buzzed with life, but inside the penthouse there was peace. Past was behind them, and the future was theirs to shape. Together, they were no longer just two people with a shared history. They were a family, ready to face the world with love, forgiveness, and new beginnings. And as Alexander looked down at the pendant shining softly against his chest, he knew this time the promise it held was real and unbreakable.